Thank you, Queen. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. You are my sunshine, Laura, my only sunshine. Ladies and gentlemen, Vince asked me to talk tonight about similes, metaphors, and analogies, and although that's rather a broad remit for my narrow time band, I'd like to wander down this road and see where the signposts take us, rather than march headlong into linguistic battle. Which brings me, of course, to my first point, that metaphors are everywhere. Not literally, of course, but metaphors are everywhere. This very morning, I woke up to the radio news and a story that Facebook is being sued by investors for failing to disclose information before the stock offering. They were hiding bad news. And the BBC reporter said, and I quote, "When the tide goes out, you can see where the bodies are buried." What an abomination to wake up to. But I did say to myself, that's going in the talk. But metaphors, as I say, are everywhere. Now here, hold on a second. Here is a piece of a news story I took at random and found a paragraph, and it's about change in Mongolia. And I'd like to play Spot the Metaphor. And if you can't read it in the back, I'll read it aloud. It says, "The Central Asian nation seems to be racing from a nomadic culture to an industrial one, practically overnight. To appreciate this transition and its inevitable tensions, play out in the lives of ordinary Mongolians, spend a few hours with Bat Erdene Badam and his family." Now, does anyone see any metaphors jumping out immediately? Racing. Racing. Okay, well, let's start with that. Racing. It's not literally a foot race, okay? They are making progress rapidly, but it's not literally a race. And it's not going to happen in 24 hours, so it's metaphorically overnight. Play out. They're not on a cricket field or pitch. They're not on a baseball field. So they're not literally playing out anything. And for spending a few hours, you're not really spending anything with Mr. Bot. Does anyone see any more?
Ordinary Mongolians.
That's not a metaphor, really. No?
Insult.
Tensions. Tension is actually a physical force. In fact, tension is from the Latin tendere, for stretch. That's an engineering metaphor. And, crucially for my purposes, transition. Transit literally means to move something or someone from one place to another. Now, most people wouldn't get that as a metaphor because there are so many metaphors that are ingrained and embedded in us that we don't notice them. And here I'd like to bring in Mr. George Lakoff. And Mr. Lakoff is he's a linguist at UC Berkeley, and he's there he is. Mr. Lakoff calls things like this orientation metaphors. Now, there's a lot of science theory in this that where I am not expert. So I'll give you the short version I understand, which is our ancestors, our way back ancestors, before they even had language, had physical senses. And they understood the world in terms of what they saw and heard and felt and smelt. And they understood things in terms of their orientation physically, especially to the sun, because it was the biggest thing around. And so, for instance, sun goes up, good, sun goes down, bad. Why? Sun goes down, it's dark, it's scary, predators can eat you. Sun comes up again, it's good. There follows from this a lot of metaphors where up is down, up is good, down is bad, dark is bad, light is good. After all, no one would ever write a love song, "You are my darkness, my only darkness." Maybe Tim Minchin, but just about nobody else would write such a love song. the most famous metaphor of modern times, came about in Missouri, of all places. Missouri in 1946. Winston Churchill was awarded an honorary degree, and he gave a speech about the world in 1946, and he famously said, "From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended on the continent." Thud. Two things to remember about that. First, Churchill did not invent the phrase iron curtain. Second, but he made it famous. Second, the reaction to that speech was very mixed. Many people felt he was being alarmist. This was 1946. Stalin was not yet the enemy. But 2 years later, when Stalin isolated and blockaded West Berlin and tried to starve them into submission, everybody remembered Churchill's metaphor. Special report: the Berlin blockade, Moscow draws the Iron Curtain. And in fact, for the rest of the Cold War, even today, in fact, people recognize that metaphor, Iron Curtain. And this is on the EU's website today. Cultural events will commemorate the tearing down of the Iron Curtain. That is a metaphor that lasted. Why? Because it's simple. It's easy to understand. Iron, thud. You could hear the thud of an iron curtain coming down. And a good metaphor, an effective metaphor, is easy to understand and plausible. After the success of Iron Curtain as a metaphor, with the rise of communism in China, some people in the State Department tried to use the metaphor, the bamboo curtain. And it didn't work, because it wasn't plausible. I've seen someone go through a bamboo curtain in a bar, and the landlord said, "Don't worry, it happens all the time." Of course, bamboo is weak. A bamboo curtain is not going to hold anyone in or keep anyone out. So in order to be effective, it has to be plausible. And this brings me then naturally to the point of analogy in metaphor. Now, analogy is a Greek word. It means proportional, proportionate. You know, shoe is to foot as glove is to hand. Very simple analogy. It fits. You're comparing things that are proportionally comparable. Unlike bamboo and iron. The systems may have been similar, but the metaphor didn't work. And nobody remembers the term bamboo curtain today. But to sum up, in summary, metaphors are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Effective metaphors are simple and plausible. Convoluted metaphors, overly contrived metaphors, hard to understand, and mixed metaphors are not effective as metaphors. After all, if when the tide goes out, you see the bodies, they're not buried. Finally, keep things proportional. A good metaphor is analogous, that is to say, proportionate. Vince.